You are listening to the Prosper Law Podcast. Learn how to reduce stress, have more time, and make more money. Come on in.
I'm Greg McCollum, and I built a 7-figure criminal defense law firm. I formed Prosper Law to show criminal defense law firm owners who are desperate for success how to grow from under $200,000 to $1 million and beyond. Welcome to another edition of Prosper Law Podcast. As you know, Prosper Law shows criminal defense lawyers how to create more free time, lessen stress, and make more money. I'm very happy to be able to tell you that we've got Seth Price as a guest on here. Many of you probably know Seth. And our topic is how AI is used for criminal defense lawyers. So Seth, I've known for years, and he has created this company called BlueShark. He's the founder of BlueShark, which is a digital marketing company. He's also a partner in a law firm, Price Benowitz, which has a very robust criminal defense practice in multiple states. So Seth, thank you for joining us.
Great to be here. Excited to see what you guys have created. I'd say the criminal defense space is one that is ripe for best practices, and AI hopefully will be an extra tool for everybody to get that much more efficient, that much more profitable and prosperous.
In terms of our audience here, of course, I know you well, and a lot of people know you very well, but can you give us some of the listeners that maybe don't know you, just the benefit of your background and how you got to where you are now and the roles that you are in?
So 20 years ago, a college law school buddy, Dave Benowitz, who went to UPenn together and then law school in DC together, decided to start a firm. And he's a lawyer's lawyer. He's like you. He loves the courtroom, and he battles, and he teaches up at Harvard Law for a week a year, got an LLM at Temple in trial advocacy. So he loves that forum. I was the opposite. I wanted to find myself a way out of the courtroom. So from day one, when we started our firm, we divided and conquered. He was the chief legal officer, and I was the chief marketing and operations person. Built up a criminal footprint, DC, Maryland, Virginia, eventually South Carolina, that has, now 20 plus criminal lawyers in a firm that has 50 lawyers total across personal injury, criminal defense, and family law. We built this based on digital, and about a decade ago, I took my in-house digital team that had helped build Price Benowitz and spun what is today BlueShark Digital, which represents about 300 law firms nationwide for elite SEO, local search, PPC, LSAs, everything when it comes to search. And so I have a great passion for building and scaling law firms. I have a podcast on how to scale law firms and another podcast on SEO. So the intersection of marketing and law firm growth is really where my passion is at.
So in terms of the criminal defense law side, when I think of you, I think of like all things digital marketing, like think digital. And when I think about criminal defense, because there's so many ways to market so many other companies or law firms, but when I think of criminal defense, it just seems like it's so inherently based in search. Something terrible happens to somebody, something they never expected, and all of a sudden they need a solution, they need a lawyer, they need help. So what do? They search. They weren't going to search yesterday. They never thought about searching. They don't care who any criminal defense lawyers are. That has nothing to do with them. Now, all of a sudden, that's the primary focus of their life. And it seems like you have really that's been your focus on marketing your law firm, Price Benowitz, it's really just been digital. Is that really almost all of your focus? Do you do any other type of marketing and things to draw in clients?
That's a great question. I think that when it comes to criminal defense, you're exactly right. That to me, the reason why it started with criminal was that search is so perfect for it. Very few markets. There are a few markets where people market offline for criminal defense, but in the markets that we're in, there really isn't, which means that for most people, meaning search is powerful for everything. It's the reason why Google is Google and makes the crazy money it does, is because search is where people go to transact most things. That said, in criminal, it's even more so because there aren't established brands offline. So you're not starting with a place. And people, if you do a great job for somebody and they had a DUI or, God forbid, a domestic violence charge, and you get them not guilty, they don't want to go around bragging about that. Their whole point is, the whole reason they pay you and hire you as a criminal defense lawyer is to not think about it and not tell people about it, is to keep it quiet. So while in other areas like personal injury, where there's a big check handed out and everybody wants to tell somebody if they got a nice check, in criminal defense, it's really the opposite. So it's super, super ripe for search. And that's where we've made our mark. And, Google changes the algorithm, and they've forced more money needed in paid search and all sorts of other different levers. But I think your point is very well taken. In non-criminal defense, I think that personal injury in particular, off-brand has become, offline marketing, whether it be billboards, TV, radio, has become more and more important because search has gotten so competitive. And that in criminal defense, you can still make a buck without offline search, but that as the issue that we have in criminal defense is we have a fee for service concept, which means that you can only charge so much in most situations, which means you can only afford to pay so much for those cases. And again, search comes down to the most ripe point. They're not interested, they're not kicking tires. You're looking for somebody, they've been charged with something. And if they're charged with something, assuming they're not getting a public defender, they're going to hire somebody. The question is it you?
In terms of like the marketing in general, I had a television show that I ran, and I ran it. It was basically a 2-minute infomercial, interview style, where I had a show host who interviewed me and would ask me a question, and I would try to answer, a relevant question. And we would have series on, say, domestic violence or DUI or self-defense and assault and these kind of things. And, I ran that on television for, I think it's 5 or 6 years, and it was a big expenditure, and it was on every Monday night. And then people actually would tell me they liked it and they enjoyed it, and people would recognize me if I went to a coffee shop or was in a diner. Strangers would come up to me and say hello and say they enjoyed watching it and that sort of thing. But so I ran this for 6 years, and but I can't really point to that driving business. And I've always been curious about billboards for criminal defense lawyers and things like that.
I think your first dollars are spent online. I mean, look, you built a brand, and that's awesome. I would hope that you built a brand for lawyers in general, and that when people need a lawyer, they thought of you. And it's tough because it's hard to be known for many things, but offline branding, if you took all the money and time you spent on that and took the dollar value of that time, and you just bought paid clicks, what would you have gotten in comparison? That said, I'm seeing right now on the personal injury side, it's very hard to get an ROI determined because, it's not like somebody saw that commercial and called you because they had just been arrested. The question is, when they searched and they were in need, did that brand that you created make you a differentiator? If you were number 3 in the 3-pack, or you had a paid ad at the top, are they more likely to click on you because I know that name and that name means something to me? And it's frustrating. And when you see billboards, TV, radio, the craziest part is that's just half of it. As an SEO company, we love it because it drives more traffic and Google likes brand, and that's all wonderful. But it is now you have to sort of do digital and other things. I think for most of your audience, focusing on digital until there's diminishing return on that digital, to me, is the best use of money. There's not another place, and it may sound self-serving, but I'm telling you that even though I own a digital agency, I do non-digital in the personal injury space, whereas in the criminal space, we are not even at 20 lawyers at a diminishing point of return. Is it possible that jail mail is going to help you? Sure, that's somebody in need. But to try to build a brand and to have the gumption to do that, I think is a very tall order. Is it bad? No. Is it helping you? And are you possibly getting cases that you refer out for other areas of law that get referrals in other ways? There are lots of positives for you being on TV, but from a direct ROI perspective, criminal, I still think digital is where it's at.
And just to follow up on that a little bit, because we know that the personal injury lawyers, they do all these things. They have the billboards, they have the television, and you see that especially in Myrtle Beach. There's a huge billboard presence here. And do you think that's just because the average case values are so much higher for personal injury lawyers, not even to, and then they get into the huge cases where they get a huge windfall, and criminal lawyers, we just don't get that.
Correct. So what's your average case value? If you were honest with yourself, on a heavily misdemeanor volume practice, let's say the average case value might be $5,000. And I know that there are higher dollar cases that come, but it's, and let's add those into the mix. Let's be generous and say that the average case value, when everything is averaged out with all of your traffic, misdemeanors, and criminal, is $6,000, right? Across the board. And I'm just using that as a number. You substitute the number that would be right. But knowing how, unless you're a super high felony shop, most people who have a heavy traffic misdemeanor count are not going to break a $6,000-$7,000 average fee. All of a sudden, Google becomes, Google's tough. Like pay-per-click is not something that most criminal lawyers can use, that they're going to have to hope that they can get an ROI from LSAs and then find organic reach, because there's not an easy answer to this. And so to me, when you start going to billboards and TV, the reason that people are going there is they need more volume than they can get through search, and that they also recognizes that everything works together. In the PI space, we've seen large players like Morgan, and we're going to see more with private equity coming into the space, that have built brands that are significant. And that then becomes a differentiator, because those people have brand equity when people go to search. The good news we have in criminals, we don't really have that. But to me, to think that you're going to get brand equity large enough for somebody to remember your name when somebody is in need. And look, Myrtle Beach is a smaller community where if you really go hard, you probably could get known hitting the local bars for the locals. But what you forget is we're trying to get, in Myrtle Beach, for example, I assume you're trying to hit the tourists, and they're not going to get that brand equity because they're in and out of town. So, those are the people probably with the larger dollar cases or larger margin cases, whereas the local market is probably going to be more price sensitive than somebody else who's has means that may have come in from out of town, stereotyping on 4 different levels. But when you're generalizing like that, again, comes back to your point that search is so powerful in that case.
One of the things is that it seems like, because I've known you for years, and I see you at conferences, and it seems like everything is so tilted in favor of personal injury lawyers. And I've always told people that the personal injury law firms, they're just more advanced in terms of business systems and technology, in terms of marketing. And the criminal defense lawyers, it seems like we've almost been, a neglected space. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to do the Prosperate Law, to help the lawyers the way that people helped me. Do you think that's true? Do you think that criminal defense lawyers is an underserved market in terms of growing a law firm and knowing how to market and knowing how to run a business with systems?
Yes. I think that criminal defense lawyers are generally further behind for a bunch of reasons. And I think your thesis is correct. I think the need for what you're doing is important. And it's historically, we were very blessed that a lot of the best lawyers, I did a LinkedIn post about this not that long ago, a lot of the best lawyers in the market when we started wouldn't market at all. They may or may not, they had a website at best, but and they were very talented. And when I entered the market, the people that were marketing were the worst. And so, in criminal defense, I think that part of it is people went into it, like my law partner, Dave, and people like yourself, where going to court was the calling card. You got some referrals from going to court and making sure that people saw you there all the time in those relationships. That's great, but it took away valuable time from it. On personal injury, very few cases go to court. If you have 100 cases, you may file on 40, even 50% of them, but the number of cases that make it to the courthouse steps even is a fraction of your overall cases, where in criminal defense, every case is going to be in court at some point or another. So it's much more time intensive. And that until somebody figures out systems to leverage other lawyers, again, we could do a whole podcast on hiring and training. And are you hiring experienced people? How much are you going to train? Because somebody might leave, but if you don't train, they might stay. Like, all of those are real issues that every lawyer, including conversations you and I have had over the years, Greg, have struggled with. And so to me, I think it is an underserved market, but it's also a market that has been resistant to best practices because they think of it as a practice and not a business. Whereas a lot of the personal injury lawyers, there's a guy a client of BlueShark's historically, who's once in present, a client who went into the PI space, just saying, I'm going to do this. Never, got a degree, put a shingle out and market it. It was a business, and he figured out how to hire staff around him, sometimes slower or faster than he needed to. But that criminal defense lawyers, because you have that immediate issue of keeping judges happy in real time, you don't have as much wiggle room. The cringe factor of who you send to court can't quite be as, in criminal defense, as long as you don't miss a statute of limitations, there's a fairly large period of time where you can figure out an issue. Whereas if you send the wrong person to court and they get crushed by a judge, that's immediate pain. And so I think criminal defense lawyers have a couple of negatives towards scaling that others don't. And they have been both resistant, as well as the courses that are out there. I don't think, why the reason there's a demand for your need have not been tailored to their needs. But part of the reason is there have been less free with spending on these courses and on these established areas, partially because of the smaller margins. The personal injury departments can have massive margins, which allow for more money to be invested both into marketing and coaching.
So let's shift a little bit toward AI. AI is coming. A lot of people are terrified about it. I was just talking to somebody, and they were talking about how they work in a bar in Clemson University, like a relative of theirs, a friend of theirs does. And the bar, which is one of the most popular bars apparently, was firing all the bartenders to replace them with robots to serve beer, this is astonishing to me. And it almost seems unbelievable. But in terms of AI, and I've used AI some, and I'm using it more and more and trying to learn more and more about it. But in terms of how do you see now, in your roles, how do you see artificial intelligence affecting criminal defense lawyers today, like right now? How do you see it affecting us?
I would say the good news is, if leveraged, it makes you more efficient, and it can make your staff more efficient. Right? There are elements to it, and you got to test what's right for you. But AI integrated into case search, LexisNexis has a pretty slick product. I have not played around much with the new Clio product, but each of that integrates AI with Fastcase and their new AI investment. But AI can, work and allow you to scale the time you're using, or to scale it, but be much more efficient with what you're doing. It can be used for, we're seeing the PI space for demands. If you're using it to help draft, I think that it's an amazing tool. If it could be used, for something as simple as responses to emails. I've been using Fixer AI as a tool to be able to, give me pre-populated responses. Is it perfect? No. And if you turn in legal research without looking at it, there's risk. That's why doing it through ChatGPT versus using something like a LexisNexis, where the chance of a hallucination is less, where it's just made up stuff. But just like anything else, don't check your common sense at the door. It's not magic. It is a tool. It's getting better with every day. You've heard the horror stories of people that have done things they shouldn't. But there are, we talk about, intake at criminal is one of those things that can be really problematic, and using, whether it's an off-the-shelf AI tool or whether you're just going to create your own prompts, allowing people to check the quality of the person answering your calls. We've all listened to calls and been astonished at how badly our team is doing over the years. And that AI is an extra checks and balances. The best practice is you're listening to recorded calls, hard stop. But you know what? You can get if you're not going to do that, you can use AI to be listening to your team and figure out when they are not being empathetic, when they're missing things. So there's great stuff there. There are now AI tools that will screen your calls. The jury is out. I am not using those yet, but it's better than nothing. And that if you have a crappy answering service, the AI may screen out the important calls. Let's say you're a solo, and if the AI voice can figure out what's a real case for you and get those transferred to your cell phone, God bless, so you can close those and make money and not be bothered by other things. With each piece, using this as a prime example, AI is going to screw up a certain number of your intakes, no doubt. But how many would the live person screw up as a counterpoint? It's sort of, I think, like the issue that we're seeing with autonomous vehicles. If you've been in a Waymo, you realize that Uber drivers may be out of business in the not too distant future. Scary, scary prospect. And you're going to hear about an accident. We've seen a couple that have been autonomous vehicles driving. But if the autonomous vehicles get into an accident 1 out of 5,000 hours of driving or whatever it is, but manual drivers are getting into an accident every 1,000 hours, is this looking at what is the cost benefit there and what makes more sense? And I think that criminal lawyers are because they have the judges so much closer to their cases than PI lawyers, where all of pre-lit is being done without being seen by a judge. And even lit, there's so much that goes on before there's really somebody with a microscope on what's going on, that AI has been integrated much, much more heavily. Whereas, in criminal defense, there is somebody looking at you much more quickly in the process, and there's just the risk calculus is different. That said, I think that at each level there are efficiencies to be gained, and that the better you do that, great. But that once again, and I'm going to land the plane with this, just like the coaching programs are more tailored towards PI because there's more money in that space, the AI companies that have tailored to a practice area have launched onto PI because, once again, they're charging on a case-by-case basis. And in many instances, that money can be passed along to clients as an expense. Whereas in criminal, we're back to the fixed flat fee where that money is going to be a hard cost against you. And so that it's harder to justify those larger expenses, whereas the very low cost off the market $20 to $100 a month programs can do amazing things, but you're back to that practitioner using those tools. And I think that's where the friction comes in.
As I've thought about this a lot and studied it and looked at AI, in my own criminal defense law firm and then applying it to other law firms, criminal defense law firms as well, the thing that I kept coming back to, certainly earlier in the conversation that I was having, was that it seemed like the biggest impact and the thing that I was the most interested in terms of the AI impact was just search. I could see how search was going to be impacted, maybe even ultimately just completely taken over. And I know some of your views on AI search and how you're saying more or less that it's coming, it's not here yet. So let's talk about SEO versus the long language models and things like that, and the schema for AI. But what's your take? Can you just give me your?
Yeah, sure. No, it's the ultimate question as an agency owner. We are seeing AI, and I think you summed up the immediate response, which is it's cool, right? You're getting cases from it. There's some cases from it. I think what we're seeing is less likely to be replaced, but sort of for it to become part of what we call search. And that what's interesting is that the AI is not magic. It's going to get the information from somewhere. When it first started, we saw it going to like directories like Avvo and Yelp and things like that. that most of us haven't cared about for a long time. And I think, like most things, the reason Google did so well is it gave you answers that you could use and you appreciated and you trusted. I think that what we have seen, and this is true with Google, it's true, we're seeing, and I have a presentation on this, but we may get to do to your group live, that as we look at whether it be Gemini, whether it be Claude, whether it be ChatGPT, the parent companies that own those, they are pulling responses that to date have mirrored the Google 3-pack. And so there are things that we are advocating for: dusting off your awards, focusing on best, rewriting your bios, making sure that the tools can search and find information and see you as an authority. But they need to find answers to the question. And if Google's 3-pack or map pack is trusted, and Google is doing things, we are seeing this, and that will be presented when our team presents it at your conference. What we are seeing is that Google is making sure that its API is open so that they are able to, whether it be Claude or ChatGPT, can get in and use the Google search as part of the answer to the question that they are answering. And that to me has been fascinating. Again, we are looking at how the different places that all of the different language models are looking for results are. But the irony is that the basics of SEO are still helping people become part of that answer. And at some point, the question is, will we see AI results and search results, or will it be something that is sort of an amalgamation of that together? And the jury is still out as to how Google will handle it, because still the lion's share of traffic goes through there, and everything else is still a smaller percentage of overall search.
Well, you just made a comment here, and you're talking about Google to make sure that it's API. I think it's what you said. It's API.
So that Google is basically, Google is a destination. So whether it's ChatGPT or whether it's Claude, is looking for information for its results. We're watching Google take steps to allow for those platforms to get in and get the information. One example is in the Google local interface through Google Business Profiles, or GBP, that the Q&As are now being opened up so that they can use and search those. It's a searchable. You can now search the Q&As and questions asked and information provided by the law firm, so that as I use ChatGPT, I was coming off a cruise last week. I wanted to know, did my hotel have a pool? Did the hotel I was going to what time was breakfast served to? And so what Google is doing is it's allowing that information, likely, is coming from its Google Business Profile. And that information, if they did not allow, it could come from the website itself, but very often those are harder to find, that Google is allowing the information to come through and allow, I was on a business trip. Would my dog Scout be allowed at the hotel? And so it's in, what is the pet fee? And if you're able to give that information in a way that that Claude and clearly Gemini and ChatGPT are allowed to get to it, that by providing that information within the Google interface, we are now finding that these other language models are getting that from Google. Over time, Claude would love not to use Google as part of its algorithm. I'm sure they would love to be able to have their own information independently, but for the foreseeable future, the most trusted information is still within the Google sphere. And therefore, we want to make sure that that is optimized. And at BlueShark, we focus so much on local search and making sure that that information is available. And we're seeing, that answers your question, Google making sure that those language models can get in and get the information from its platform rather than having to find the information somewhere else.
So the term API, what is API? What does that stand
basically,
for?
you're allowing, this is something, whether it's the interface to get into a software. So if you're on, let's say Clio, a lot of your constituents are on Clio. Clio allows other programs to send information to Clio and gain information, so that if you want to create it's a gateway, so that if you want to use a program to automate something, that would, if it's a closed API, they cannot receive or they cannot get information in or out of the program. But if it's open, it allows for people to transact information in and out. And that information allows you to use third-party tools and not what's just proprietary. Great example that's going on with Filevine. I don't know, there are certain criminal lawyers who use Filevine. Filevine used to allow information to go in and out to different third-party AI companies like Eve or Supio or Even Up. And they decided they wanted to create their own AI program and saw those other programs as a threat to their future existence. So they shut down access. They closed the API to those third-party tools and forced you, if you wanted an AI tool within the Filevine world, you had to use their AI. You couldn't use an outside vendor to work with your information. And so those are the things that what Google is saying is, look, we want to be that destination. We want to be the answer, and we want to remain relevant. So they are allowing, Claude and ChatGPT to search their ecosystem to gain that information and be part, and then become that, it keeps people like myself, who's an SEO geek, continuing to feed Google. If hypothetically, and we've seen this, ChatGPT has a huge Microsoft investment in it. Nobody cares about Bing. They cared about Bing results. The only place that Bing results are relevant are for ChatGPT. Yelp. Who cares about Yelp? We're seeing those in ChatGPT results more than other, than things you cared about. And so Google's saying, hey, Yelp, nobody cares about it. It's not a great platform for lawyers. Lawyers have ignored it, and it's generally been a wasteland. If Google's allowing ChatGPT to gain the information they need for results from their platform, it makes Google still an important destination. And if you want to succeed at ChatGPT or Claude, the results in Google Local are still at the moment very relevant, because that's where they're pulling their information.
Yeah, I want to ask you a follow-up question too, kind of delve into this a little bit, because you said you were talking about the Q&A, so the question and answer, because people are searching, they're searching for answers. And so that's the key. Google always wants you to find the answer, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't go on it. So you said in the GBP, the Google Business Profile, to put the questions and answers in there, and that way when the AI search goes in, it'll see those questions and answers. So in other words, if I understand what you're saying, you would say put it in the profile, in that content, and not necessarily in the website. So it could be on the website too.
Website, yes, that's not the issue, because they're pulling from the website. This is more, and again, there are two types of Q&A. There's Q&A like substantive Q&A, very important. But this is more about, this might be questions about your business. There could be substantive ones as well, but this is more business, your business relationship with clients. Do you charge a consultation fee? What are your hours? What areas do you service? Things to that effect. While it may be on your website, it may be easier for them to extract it from that Google interface, the Google Business Profile interface, GBP. That is one place. But what they are, as people are conversing with these language models, they are looking for answers to things. Yes, Q&A on websites still important, but leveraging the Google profile where relevant, making sure that questions that they may be looking for are there. I'm less concerned at the moment for the law to be in there, but anything dealing with the business and the transaction that you're looking to have with people would be very valuable to have in that Q&A. And it's beyond Q&A. It's just a place for you to put information out that is then searchable in a more immediate way.
So that would be location, kind of cases you take, your emphasis, that sort of thing, as opposed to
I think
longer...
that right now I'm seeing that more advantageous there. But your point is very well taken. In the future, there may be, questions about how many miles per hour is reckless driving a crime versus a traffic offense. There may be a point where we put that in there. With every day, we're learning more and pushing the envelope more, and trying to figure out how can we be relevant to these language models.
For somebody listening to this who has a criminal defense law firm or a criminal defense law practice and they know AI exists, what would be some advice that you would give for somebody to use AI and basically not fall behind? In other words, what are some simple things that you would advise people to be looking at doing?
I think it's the start. It's like Nike says, just do it. Start playing with it yourself, seeing what's there. Join affinity groups like this and find out what other people are doing to move the needle. There's going to be a certain amount that is integrated into things you're already paying for, like legal research. There are third-party tools that are out there. I think in criminal defense, again, coming down to margins, I hope that people can leverage some of the, what is called free or low-cost actual language models. I would recommend not being cheap and using the free ones, but rather using one of the paid ones. If you're on G Suite's, it may not be that much more to add Gemini to your account. Claude may be better for many things, but start with utilizing it, having it open on people's desks. If you're older school, trying to get individuals to leverage it as much as they can and find evangelists within your firm when possible. It may not be you, but find other people who can create different prompts that may be able to, and reward your people for it. Anytime you can, whether it be through great feedback or whether it be through financial incentives or contests, figuring out who can leverage the language models to move you along, I think will serve you well in the long run.
Okay. As we close this out, I want to ask you, this being the Prosper at Law podcast, what is one of the most powerful things that you have done or you did to make your law firm more prosperous? What are one of the key things that you could share that you have done that you said, oh, that worked, that was a breakthrough, maybe even a quantum leap that made my law firm more prosperous?
Well, look, the obvious answer, and I'll give you a secondary one, has been search. There's no argument. In criminal defense, it's God's gift to criminal defense lawyers. Search is where we've built our business. We would not have 8 figures of criminal defense if it was not for search. That said, it's gotten more competitive. Google has squeezed everybody where organic is less voluminous and paid is now part of most people's at scale business model. As that has forced margins down somewhat, I think that focusing on profitability and looking at intake and taking the sales component much more mathematically, looking at the percentage of closed of cases. We look at high, medium, and low dollar prospects, and what is our close rate, and what are we getting from those cases, and then adjusting. That we have seen there are lawyers that just can't close, and making sure that you reallocate your intake to somebody, whether it be a lawyer, non-lawyer, or hybrid lawyer that's a sales lawyer, but making sure that the person who's closing the cases, just like your recording intake, is monitored, coached, and that you're looking at the numbers to make sure that all of the hard work done in marketing, which is, it's not free. There's a cost to the case, whether you know it or not, whether it's sweat equity, taking lunches and going to bar events, going to conferences we've met at, or whether it's digital and search, paid or organic. There's a cost, making sure that you squeeze as much juice out of the orange as you can.
All right, Seth, thank you very much. I want to thank you for joining us here. Thank you for joining us for Prosper at Law podcast. We'll see you next time.
If you want to know more, go to prosperatlaw.com. We show criminal defense law firm owners how to reduce stress, have more free time, and make more money. Thanks for listening.